Too bad you're not there on a Wednesday. I can take you to my Bible study. Did I tell you who it is?
She meant some German.
I'm going to read briefly from the beginning of the next chapter, which is the following morning. And Ella's still dreaming a little bit. And this is actually the beginning of the chapter where she sees her grandmother's library for the first time. And the library ends up being quite an important place in the story because that's where this very valuable book is kept. But this is how her morning begins. I was on the field and Coach was telling me I had to work harder on my soccer drill. My feet were slow and dragging and I couldn't seem to connect well with the ball. Suddenly it wasn't Coach anymore, it was my dad telling me I had to hurry up and get packed because we were going out on the river and I was wishing I didn't have to go with him. My eyes half opened and my brain shook itself like a dog after a rainstorm. I finally realized I must be dreaming and that it was time to wake up. It must be because some tall, awful person was standing by the foot of my bed, hemming like crazy, which made Lou dip his head, his tail wagging in apology, like he or I had done something wrong. What is it? I asked blearily. It is time, Ella, my grandmother said, to get up. Suddenly, I sat upright. A freeze fell over me. I could hardly breathe. Did my grandmother have bad news? Is that why I had to get up? Bad news from Seattle? What happened? I asked in a panic. Did something happen? Happen? My grandmother moved to the curtain, pulled it open, and waved a hand toward the courtyard, the sky, the scattered birds. Certainly something has happened. It is called mourning. Her blue eyes returned to me. Really, Ella, you mustn't miss the best part of the day. Come have your breakfast. I lay back down on the bed, my heart pounding. I didn't want to risk facing Mrs. Von Stern in case laser beams were coming from my eyes, and I killed her with one look. Okay, I used as calm a voice as I could manage. I practiced my breathing exercises. Coach always told us that breathing was important. I'm coming. And I think I'll read one more short scene. Ella spends much of her time in this house, which is in itself a sort of whole complete world, and getting to know her grandmother, who's quite a character. But she does get to leave the premises occasionally, and on this occasion she's with Rosie, who has, for reasons she's not clear, taken a rather instant dislike to Ella. But Rosie's uncle runs a horse ranch, and so this is her one opportunity she's invited to go riding. And she was excited enough about this invitation that she didn't mention that she actually hadn't ridden before, ever. So she's in the truck with Miguel and Rosie on her way to the ranch. Even sitting next to a kid who had no time for me, I was pretty excited. I had been so cooped up. I felt like Lou when he finally got a walk after I'd been away at school all day long. When I saw a sign saying we were crossing the Rio Grande, I couldn't help saying something. The Rio Grande. I looked out the window expecting some huge glittering blue that looked like, the Mississippi. Instead, I just saw a wide stretch of red-brown slurry. Geez, it's not looking that grande right now, is it? Not right now, Miguel said, but you should see her farther up, out of the city. Beautiful river. He paused. Dangerous, too, You don't want to underestimate that river. Dangerous? I laughed like he'd made a joke. This water looked like something you could practically wade across if you had to. After we cleared the Rio and some neighborhoods on the other side, we started driving through more open country. Eventually, we headed uphill. And when we got to two tall wooden posts under a sign that said Circle C Ranch, we turned. This is Carlos's place, Miguel said, and I could tell it was somewhere Miguel and Rosie loved. Ranch might sound grassy and green, but the Circle C was all dust, wood, horses, and flies. By one low building was a big wood board with a list of painted rules, including, in capital letters, "Don't scare the horses." My dad says you like to ride, Rosie asked me. Since it was pretty much the first question she had ever directed my way, there was only one thing to do. I had to lie. Oh, yeah. I gazed off into the distance as if I were imagining life back home in Santa Rosa and how much riding I did there. Do you have a horse? Oh, yeah. I nodded. Yep, he's called Kepler. And what is he? A pinto? Palomino? She seemed interested, so I had to keep going. Yeah, that's right, a Pinto Palomino. She gave me a weird look. Later, when I knew more about horses, I realized it was like I had just told Rosie that my mom drove a Hummer Mini Cooper. So she gets put up on a horse who she's assured is very gentle, with the name Paloma, who's just supposed to be a real sweetheart. And I imagined some small, cute picture book pony. But when I saw her all saddled and ready, Paloma was a giant gray creature, more like a camel or a dinosaur than a horse. My palms started sweating. But I was ready. I mean, I thought I was. I felt like I was in some kind of movie where I could forget my troubles and ride across the Wild West, looking for bandits or gold, with a big blue sky above me and my posse by my side. The movie lasted about 10 minutes. So here's a piece of advice I'll give you free of charge. Don't, if you can help it, lie to horse people about how much riding experience. It isn't worth it. Best case scenario, they can tell right away what a fake you are as you joggle along on the horse's back and can't keep the animal from stopping to eat dry weeds every 5 seconds, and no amount of clicking your teeth or kicking its fat sides seems to persuade it to keep going, like everyone else's is doing, so you have to wait a lifetime, getting left farther and farther behind until your horse decides on its own to move. Worst case scenario, you finally get the horse into a trot to catch up, and from there it makes up its own mind to lope for no reason, and you tear past everyone else on the trail. And then because your balance is so bad, when the horse spooks at some random bird or thistle, you slide right off, landing flat on your back in a huge cloud of humiliating dust. That's what happened to me. For a minute I was too winded to cry or breathe or say anything at all. I couldn't move. I felt like a piece of roadkill. Miguel jumped off his horse and kneeled next to me, trying to find out if I'd broken anything. I'm okay, I managed to force out. Sorry, I don't know. The two girls, Lola and Rosie, stayed calm on their horses. You all right? Lola asked. She had sunglasses on, so I couldn't tell her expression. Yeah, even if I couldn't exactly breathe just yet. I felt like that a couple of times, Rosie said, when I was first starting to ride. She didn't have to spell it out for me. She had figured out I was a beginner. And I think that's where I'll end tonight.
What inspired you to write the young person's book?
My kids were getting to an age where the books they were reading were the kinds of books I had really loved, reading. I mean, that this age, 11 and 10 and 12, that was a really kind of key reading period for me. And I had always thought I might at some point write a book for that age. And then this particular character, Ella, kind of came into my mind. And once her voice was in my mind, I knew it would be a children's story. And then the pieces kind of assembled from there.
So you did it to impress your children?
I did, basically, yeah. Just to try to win favor anyway.
How was your writing different, writing this book, than your novels?
Well, so it's interesting. The editorial process turned out to be more different than I was expecting. And I had some interesting discussions over the course of it about, making sure my language was a little simpler, a little sparer, but also not doing too much of that. I didn't want to pare my voice down from, too much. But it was also a good lesson in plotting. It's also a mystery, which I've never written. That's maybe as different as writing for kids, too, to really try to, have plot mechanics in there in a different way than I
Did you do that
normally.
before you started?
Did I?
Do you know all the plot
I
mechanics?
didn't, no. So I went through a few different drafts to sort of make all of those pieces, function together the way they were supposed to. But other things were kind of familiar, but there definitely were explorations along the way. Yeah.
Did you know horses or Albuquerque, or did you?
Yes, so I do know both. I was not a huge writer, but I did write, and I still do. I have a grandmother who lived in Albuquerque for the better part of 50 years, maybe more than that actually. And I used to visit her, and she was much like this character. And so she was much like this character. Her biography is nothing like the grandmother, but as a person she was. And that house is very much her house, and she did have 80 or 90 peacocks. who you asked and who you believed. So yeah, it was. I always had thought about recreating that place because it's a very magical place.